So once again, welcome everybody to this third and last coaching web meeting of our SDHp2m project. The topic of today is finances and financing and economics. Of course, not in general, but related to the solar district heating plans. As you saw from the agenda, which was sent by Per Alex, it will be divided mainly into two parts. The first one will focus on the specific conditions for financing and economics in the different SDHp2m regions and countries, I would say. And in the second part, we can see what we can do about it to support this and to improve this economics, for instance, by finding different sources of financing. And we will have different presentations from Denmark and Germany first, then we will see some other examples or at least conditions in other countries. As usual, you can ask questions in the Q&A sessions after maybe after the end of the first part and after the end of the second part, or if you have some, let's say, urgent questions, you can also type them in the chat box. So I will have a look at them and then ask them to the speakers. What's more, as usual, also this web meeting will be is being recorded actually, and this means that then we will have a video on our website and on YouTube as well. And I ask you to please also use this tool, which is a very nice dissemination tool. So we at the moment we have the available the video for the solar biomass web meeting, and I just checked that on YouTube this has just 60 views, which is a very small number. So please really use this opportunity for disseminating, because it's a very valuable coaching tool, not only for ourselves but also for external stakeholders, let's say, in the project. Okay, I think that's all from my side as an introduction. So I will now give the word to Per Alex, and I will open your presentation. So this is for the second part. Okay, that should be the one. Okay, Per Alex, please. Can you see my screen at the moment?
No.
No, maybe. So just one moment. I am the organizer and I should assign myself the speaker role. That's very strange, but. Okay, now you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Please. So I will move the slides for you.
Yes. So immediately go to the first one.
Sorry, just one moment. Okay.
Yeah, so I was a bit in doubt what was interesting here, but as always, I start with the reality. So the reality in Denmark, if you want to implement a solar district heating system, is that you have to show at the economical side that the heat price will be lower than it was before. And that's maybe an easy question, but it's not that easy to answer. So what we do is that we summarize operation and capital costs, and then we divide them with the heat production to see the heat price from the plant. And that's from the total plant, from the district heating plant. So let's go to the next one, because there's an example that's easier. We have taken Fjerritslev district heating. It's wood chip fired, and it has an annual production of 68,000 megawatt hours. We have carried out a calculation for a solar thermal plant of 28,000 square meters and heat storage of 5,600 cubic meters. It should be not square meters, sorry. And as you can see in the bottom, there's a wood chip consumption and the heat production before and after solar. So let's take the next one. Then we have to calculate the economy, and that's calculation of operation experience in the two cases, the present and with the solar. And we have to have a loan. And in our case, we take normally loans in the lifetime of the technology. And it means 25 years for a solar district heating plant. And also the utility will have to, in the best case, they will ask the municipality to give a municipal guarantee so that they can go and take a loan with this guarantee behind, and then they will get a low interest rate. But the municipality, they have to ask a risk fee, because if they don't do that, EU will claim them for an unfair competition with the banks. In this case, the interest rate, efficient interest rate was 1.96%, and the municipal guarantee 1.25% every year. And this municipal guarantee or fee, it differs from municipality to municipality, so it's quite crazy. Some municipalities say nearly zero, and some say 1.5%. So 1.25, it's in the expensive end. The next one. Then there's the calculation. The first thing, we have a small grant for solar district heating. For the first 8,000 megawatt hours, we can sell the saved energy for a price, in this case, 47 euro per megawatt hour. So the investment is 6.192 million, but then we have this small grant. So we end up with 5.8 million as our cost. And you can see operation experiences is for the wood chip boiler, 23.4 euro per megawatt hour. That was what the utility told us. And for solar thermal, we put 0.7. So it means that operational savings will be 350,000, and we had an investment of 5.8 million. So we have a simple payback period of nearly 20 years. So it's, well, if you are a bank, they will say this is not very good. But the only goal here, the only thing we want to reach is lower heat prices. So we have still a saving, because the capital cost is 261,000, and we were actually saving 350,000. So we will have a little lower heat production price. And that's important for the utility, because they are not allowed to take a higher price if it's not necessary. And in this case, you could say they have already wood chips, so if they put solar and then they have a higher price, then actually in the law of heat planning, they could be claimed for taking a too high price. Next one. Then there's a sensitivity, because is this robust or not? And in this case, there's only one example where we have lowered the wood chip price with 15%, and still it's feasible. But also we could change the interest rate. Actually, I looked at the interest rate today, and it's actually already 2.25 instead of 1.96. So we could change the interest rate to see how robust this is, and we could say maybe a 20 years loan. And we could say maybe investment will not be as we expected. But normally we have an offer from a supplier for the investment, so we know quite well the price. Last one. What I think is a bit interesting here is to see the key parameters from each country. How do we calculate this? And of course also if there's a grant, because if it's not feasible, then there's you can have a better loan, or you can have a grant, or there might be some other things. But if we compare, we might come nearer feasibility in each country. So in our case, loan period 25 years, interest rate, in this case 1.96%, but it's already now 2.25. And we have this municipal guarantee we have to add. Wood chip price 60 euro per ton, energy savings, that's our grants, simple payback period 19.7 years. Yeah, so, but I think the loan period, interest rate, and simple payback periods, at least we could compare from country to country. I have not taken internal rate of return and net present value calculations, because normally we don't do them, because the board of the utility, they don't understand that kind of calculations. They look at the simple payback period, and then they look at the heat price before and after. Thank you.
Thanks, Per Alex. Maybe just a short question to understand well. So this grant you were talking about is kind of an energy efficiency certificate. So do you have to then sell these energy savings on kind of a market, or is it automatically a grant?
You have to sell it on the market. But there's also an obligation for the utility. They have to save 2% per year, so they can keep it themselves, and then they can pay their own save obligation with this. But if you want, you can sell them for Danish District Heating Association, or you can sell them for other operators at the gas companies, electricity companies, and so on. So there's a market for that.
Okay, but the price you put here, this 47, is an average price on the market.
Yeah, that's the price at that time when this calculation was made, because it's going up and down. It has been up to, I think, 60 euros,
okay.
and it has also been lower than 47.
And this is a national legislation, I guess. So it's
yeah, that's an obligation because we have to be more efficient on energy, and one of the methodologies to be that is that every utility have to save a certain percentage every year.
Yeah, I was asking because we have the same in Italy, but then if you go to the calculation, let's say it's not a very relevant incentive for solar thermal, and so it's better to let's say to apply for different kind of grants. And since these grants are all of them are at national level, you cannot cumulate, so you cannot add two different incentives. So you have to choose, and usually these energy efficiency certificates are quite low, at least for this. Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah. So now I think I will give the word to Laure. Just one moment, I will assign the speaker role to you so that you can present. Okay, please, Laure.
Good morning. So yeah, just a short presentation to show how we do this calculation in our case studies. But yeah, I will go quite fast because I think most of it is quite clear, but we can see from the questions which point we can we need to discuss further. So we also calculate in our case studies always what we call the heat generation cost, so the same as the heat cost Per Alex was talking about. So yearly global cost divided by heat fed into the district heating network annually. So you get a price in euro per megawatt hours. And before I start with the calculation, I give you already the results. In Germany, for large plants, we reach at the moment cost of 50 euros per megawatt hours. And thanks to the subsidies, we can reach 30 euros per megawatt hours. And we find this value or this heat generation cost is really something that is good for comparing for the district heating operators, so they can compare because they already know from their fossil fuel installations on the district heating network this heat generation cost. And with their 30 euros per megawatt hour, we are most of the time under or at least at the same level as these other fossil fuel plants. The calculation is done according to a norm. It's a German norm, the VDI 2067, but it's also available in English, so you can buy it if you're interested. And it's this annuity method. It's the same method that's behind the levelized cost of heat method. So the results are approximately the same. The different costs considered are, of course, capital-related costs, demand-related costs, and operation-related costs. In operation-related costs, we have the fuel, of course, and the operation and maintenance. I mean, fuel for not for solar plants, but we use also an observation period or lifetime of 25 years in our calculations. And we consider increasing prices around 1 to 3% for electricity prices, reinvestment, etc. The capital-related costs, just shortly, probably most of you know that, but here on an example that we had at one point, a comparison of the economics of solar thermal and fossil boiler. And of course, here, so the small dots are for the operation and maintenance. So you see it's really, really low for the solar thermal because there is no fuel involved. And for the blue one, it's for the fossil boiler. It's increasing very fast. And the larger dots are for the investment annually. And this is like the opposite. It's really low for the fossil fuel and much higher for the solar thermal. And so we compared, and when you sum it up, you get the blue and red line, full lines. And you see after 8 or 9 years here, we reach the same annual price. And over 25 years, you can show that the solar thermal plant is more interesting. So what is really here a key element is the investment cost. And this is due to collector, storage, hydraulics, building, land, instrumentation and control equipment, and of course planning and permits. And I give you shortly how we estimate these costs. So for the collectors, we have cost curves depending on the type of collectors, or if it's a concrete example or situation, we use the price request made directly to the collector manufacturers. And we do the same for the heat storage. And then for all other components, we apply approximate extra charge on the investment for the main components. So 7% for hydraulics, 5% for building, 3% for instrumentation, and for planning, we make a difference between a decentralized plant and centralized plant. The next important factor is the observation period. That's the name from the norm, but actually it's the lifetime of the component, and the cost for maintenance and repair. So yeah, this is just a table of what we use with the resources that we always use. So it's just for your information. If you have any question about it later, you can always contact us why we do it like this. And to the operation-related costs, yeah, we already mentioned that they are really low since there is no fuel needed. The only thing we consider for a solar thermal plant is the electricity for operation of the pumps. And here also we don't calculate it really exactly, but take an approximation of 1 to 2% of the annual solar thermal yield. And of course, you know, it's on every SDH brochure, but it's the argument that is really important at the moment to convince the operators is that on the first day of operation of your plant, you know your heat costs for the next 25 years. Just shortly to the subsidy program in Germany, all solar plants larger than 40 square meters collector area get 40% of investment cost as incentive, or alternatively, you can use the performance-related subsidy, and here you look at the yearly collector yield on the solar key mark certificates. So for Würzburg and 50 degrees temperature in the collector, and you multiply that by 0.45 euros, and you get the subsidy, unless, because for some collectors it's a really high subsidy then. So there is a limitation depending on if you're a public body or private company. It's somewhere in between 45% and 65% of the total investment costs. Then we have subsidy for district heating networks and substations, and for heat storage, as long as they are used for storing renewable energy, heat from renewable energies. And I think that's it, if you have any questions.
Thanks, Laure. Maybe just one notation, not regarding your presentation, but because AGFW has just posted on the chat the web address of our first coaching videos on solar and biomass. So thanks. So you will find it under our under the services and tools subsection of our official project website. Then, Laure, there is a question for you by Patrick from Solites. So regarding the OPEX costs of the fossils you're replacing with solar, what annual price increase do you consider for fossil? So for buying 1 unit, 1 megawatt hour in real prices, let's say.
That's a good question. You mean for this graph?
For the dot graph, because it's getting really steep. So I assume it's mostly depending on the price increase on the fossils I buy.
Yes.
But do you have some kind of number? How many percent per year? Let's say 2% per year, where you say price increase for gas?
Yeah, that's one. Well, yeah, somewhere between 1 and 3% is what we use. But
between 1 and 3%.
Graph, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And by the way, I have maybe another question connected to this one by Patrick. So when you're assuming all these assumptions, sorry for playing with words, but it's normally you, I mean the consultant, who is deciding the parameters, or is either utilities. I'm asking this because when we had this a few experiences of some calculations for the Italian utilities, for instance, usually they just want from us the capital and the O&M costs on the one hand, and the solar yield. And then they want to be the ones who are deciding on which interest rate they put on the calculation, which is the time frame for the calculations, and also which is the price increase for fossil fuels you are replacing. So what is your experience? Do you usually provide the full calculation, also including all these assumptions?
Yeah, we usually provide the full calculation, only the interest rate. We try that they give us their interest rates, their internal one, because it makes a huge difference. And when we have this, then we do this calculation for them, because sometimes they don't know, for example, operation and maintenance and so on, that it's so low.
Yeah, that's very important.
So we try to give them the numbers, and then they can always, but we always give the table with the investment costs, and then all the other assumptions, and then they can, they have our calculation, and they can also do their own calculation, starting again from the investment costs.
Okay,
but
thanks.
still they have our inputs, because most of the time, yeah, they don't know some of the things like permits or stuff like this.
And just maybe a question to Per Alex again. Do you, because I saw the values, for instance, lower put for O&M costs, and these were expressed in a share of the capital cost, basically. So between 0.5 and 2%, depending on the component. Per Alex, what is your experience? Do you usually report this cost, I think, in terms of euros or whatever currency per megawatt hour produced or something like that? So could you give us an average reference values you normally use in the calculation?
We calculate per megawatt hour, and it was those, I think, 0.7 euro per megawatt hour, yes.
So less than one, okay.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So it's really not affecting the calculation in the end if it's 20,
No.
between 20 and 30, okay.
No. But there was another thing I was wondering, because when I calculate our production price from the solar thermal plant, it's less than 20 euro per megawatt hour. And in Germany, they start with 50 and come down to 30. Of course, there's a difference in size, but it's quite interesting, this price difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks. So I will now maybe take again the speaker role. Then, of course, you will have the chances at the end of the first part to do again questions, to ask questions to both Laure and Per Alex. But now I would like to move to France. So, Mathieu, I can open your presentation. Can you hear us? I think you should unmute your microphone.
Okay, do you hear me?
Okay. Yes, perfectly. So I put your presentation.
Okay, so thank you.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give some example of French costs, and the costs come from the study case realized by Texol, and they made a note with the different price, and I will present it, and so maybe we can discuss. It's very interesting to see the different price, heat price, and so with the different country. So for the cost of the field, Texol give us two different prices for 3 grand large scale and integrated to building roof, and we are around 450 euros per square meter. around 415 and 650 euros per square meter for large scale solar field, and integrated to building roof, we are around 1,000 euros per square meter. The price given for maintenance and all the operational costs are around 0.5 and 1.5% of the investment, and another cost is around 5 and 10 euros per square meter of panel. I have no idea, and this is what is interesting, is to compare those costs with the other country and to have some feedback from more experienced countries. And this gives us a levelized cost of energy without subsidies around 80 and 120 euros per megawatt hours for solar field on free ground, large scale, and around 140 and 155 euros per megawatt hours for integrated to building roof. And the aim is to have subsidies, enough subsidies to get a levelized cost of energy around 40 euros per megawatt hours. Just to focus on subsidies in France, we can get until around from 45% to 65% of subsidies for the solar thermal parts. Okay, next slide. So here are the different costs. I'm not sure it's really interesting to detail all the different costs. It's more, for example, and to discuss with others if the costs are relevant, maybe higher than in other country. I don't really know. So maybe we can go to the other next slide. One point really interesting and it can be discussed is that Texol gives us the evolution of the price and the energy production performance during the Chateaubriand project, which is our first big project, and for us big project is 2,000 square meters. So from the feasibility studies during the SDH project, first project, we have a ratio cost around the 600 euro per square meter, and we can see that this price during the design studies, the contracting and the commissioning is evolving. There are a lot of evolution. The same for the panel surface. First at the project it was around a bit less than 2,000 square meter, and at the end it is 2,000 and around 4,000 square meter. The energy production has increased with the increase of the panel surface. And what is interesting is that the performance has really decreased and the heat price has really increased during the evolution of the studies. And this is quite interesting. Those costs are Texol sent me this cost just next week, so I don't have the explication and why there are so much differences during the different step of the project. But for me, there are two objectives which are shared with the ADEME National, with the National Agency for Energy, is to reduce the cost to 315 euro per square meters, and to be more reliability in studies, because it's not acceptable to get so much differences between the feasibility studies and at the end of the project, to get so much differences of heat cost. That's all. Maybe we can discuss of those costs. I'm really interested to get some feedback with all the cost I give, because these give me a lot of question about the French cost, and if we can reduce if these two objectives are relevant or not, and if we can achieve the objectives in France.
Thanks, Mathieu. It's really, for me, it was surprising, as you said, this 25% increase of cost for the Chateaubriand example. So from the, let's say, from the first analysis to the commissioning, because I think this is really something we should really care about, because of course this is, I mean, this such a high uncertainty could really then, how could I say, make the utilities go, for instance, for a high interest rate. At least that's my experience with Italian utilities. They use this interest rate parameter also to express the uncertainty in the costs, in the performance of the technology, especially if it's not well known as it is in France or in Italy for solar district heating. So it's really important maybe to understand, together with TechSol, this could be an important input for the project, as you said, which are the reasons behind such a relevant increase in cost. Maybe a question also to Laure and Per Alex, who have already presented, is if you also see this difference, or maybe it's the opposite, the other way around. I don't know. Maybe there is an improvement from the study to the commissioning. What is your experience?
Just Ricardo, Mathieu speaking. Yes. Maybe a part of the answer is linked to the second web coaching with the area, because it's an unusual area with a flood risk, and maybe during the studies the overcost for implementing the SDH in a flood risk area was not well appreciated. Okay,
that's interesting. Yeah. So it was a peculiar, specific area, let's say.
But if we look at the production for the plant in Chateaubriand, then it's much lower than expected. And I guess that has something with the temperatures to do. So that's, you cannot claim the consultant for that.
So you mean that it's a matter of the real operating temperature for the solar array?
It could be, I don't know. But it's because normally we have a guarantee from the supplier for the efficiency curve, and then it cannot be that low compared to the efficiency curve. It must be before, because that the temperatures are higher in the system than expected in the calculation.
Yeah, on this point, there's a guarantee performance contract with all the different actors, with utility, district heating utilities, the supplier, and the design office and TechSol. So probably this the commissioning performance of 385 kWh per square meter is minimal performance before the guarantee is activated.
Okay. Any other comments or question to Mathieu about this? These parameters? Of course, Mathieu, we will see also the other conditions in the other countries in the next presentations. So just because you asked for a comparison, actually.
Yep.
Is there any other comment or question?
Well, I was wondering, the operation costs are very high compared to what we use to calculate.
Okay, the 0.5% of the investment of the capex.
Yeah.
So it's a bit high.
Very much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something I always realize when I take the value, the Danish value, let's say, because you express it usually in euros per megawatt hour. But then, of course, if you convert it to a share of the capital cost, then it's much lower. I realize this. But maybe this is also because of your, let's say, long-term experience with very large plants. And maybe in such large plants, the share is even lower. I don't know exactly why.
Yeah, I guess so, but our figures have been the same for more than 20 years.
Yeah, that's important, I think. Yeah.
So if we take 0.5% of investment, well, I think we could make another calculation and say if you calculate with 0.7 euro and the production in SDHp2m, you will get a much lower figure.
Yes.
And also, if you compare the production price mentioned in the beginning here, it was in Germany 50 euro, but here it's more than 100 euro per megawatt hour. And we had 20 still in Denmark, so that's a huge difference.
Yeah, but also the capex in this case is very large. I would say it's at least 2 times the Danish capex, at least starting from, let's say.
Yeah.
So that's also a possibility. Okay, maybe we can now give the word to Marta for telling us something about Bulgaria, and then of course if we have more questions we can again have a session. Okay, Marta, I will open your presentation. Just one moment.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Okay.
Yes, I will present you shortly the situation and the challenges in Bulgaria. First, typical simple payback period is about 7-8 years, but this is for solar panels for domestic hot water, because we don't have a big field like in your country. Maybe I know for one field of 500 square meter, but we don't have their parameters with their calculations. So this payback period is the base case for a medium class quality panels from Bulgarian producers. Here our biggest challenge is the low energy price, heat price, which is around, in average, 40 euros per megawatt hour. Just a second, my phone. And for the length of loans, it's maximum really 10 years. Usually they even prefer like 5-6 years. Some of them maybe can go to up to 12, but really there are no cases for loans more than 15 years. Of course, it depends a lot of who are the loan receiver. If it's municipality or some state company, it's different, and they can receive bigger period for the loan. But if it's a private company, it's more risky, so they don't give for a long period. And the interest rate is also between 4% and 7%. It also depends who guarantees for the loans. If it's a state or a municipality who are behind the loan or a guarantee, then the rate can be like even 35%. But if it's a private company, it's much higher. The guarantees for the loans, it's obligatory either from the loan receiver or by a third party. In Bulgaria, it's still operating the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Sources Fund, who is acting also, on one hand, is giving loans to municipalities or to private companies for the energy projects, and also is giving some partial guarantees for the loan. It means, for example, now they have one guarantees for 7 years for a 10 years loan. What else? For the national grants, yes, there are some several national programs for energy efficiency in the building sector, but now, as far as I know, they are not open at the moment. But maybe the interesting thing is that now it's open the Norway grants, and one of the priority sector is the environment, energy, and climate change. Yesterday I take a look at the conditions, and I was surprised to see that they give very the project should be minimum 1 million euro, and which could be, I think, interesting for financing such a project, because this is probably one of the problems or the challenges in Bulgaria, that the price of the solar panels. Not that the people that don't want to have solar district heating, is just the economically feasible, feasibility of the projects, and it could be interesting to have a grant. Yes, this and also the politicians don't have ambitious plans for the increase of the renewable shares. For example, no subsidies for solar thermal energy, because we have already achieved the 20% renewable share, and nothing more is in plan for this. This is shortly from my side.
Thanks, Marta. So as far as I understood, this simple payback period you put at the beginning is calculated more for domestic application than for solar district heating.
Yes, because we don't have calculation. We don't have such a bigger project to make the calculation, and this is made at the 8% interest rate.
Okay, because maybe it could be interesting also within the project, maybe also with the support of all the partners, do even though you don't have a real project, but let's say to do a theoretical calculation of what would be these values, but for specifically for large solar district heating projects, and to see the difference. Okay. Any question to Marta, to the conditions in Bulgaria? If not, I can give maybe some points for Italy. I used the presentation for the conference, by the way. So just okay. I start from the end, let's say. So from the incentive, from the national incentive we have in Italy, and but just to go again to what's already Laure and Per Alex presented. So the goal is again to show what is the heat production cost. So I did this calculation over 15 years, and that's huge difference with respect to what showed in Germany and in Denmark. I was really impressed by the fact that you have this 25 years. I know that this is the lifetime of the collectors, but usually utilities do not have such a long, let's say, time span. They, for instance, have a concession. I don't know if this is the English term, but let's say from the municipality to operate the district heating network, for instance, and this concession could be maybe 20 or 15 years. So they have to do this calculation over this period. And in some cases, our experience is also that they ask for a calculation over 10 years. So this is really, I think, a very important sensitivity parameter, of course, for determining the heat production cost range. I put here a very large fork, let's say, for the interest rate, a very large range from 2 to 6%. Because this really depends on who is the applicant for the debt financing, for instance. So this is a key point. Large-scale solar thermal is not well known. Of course, in Italy, we don't have so many examples, so it's very difficult to say which are the standard parameters for interest rate if you go to a bank and ask for debt financing for such a plant. So it's really, it can vary a lot depending on who is the applicant for this financing. And maybe if you can also find some rotation funds, for instance, which can support your interest. Then we have a very good incentive. This is the point. You see in the upper part of the slide, this incentive is called Conto Termico 2.0. It has recently been changed, improved. That's why it's 2.0. And the threshold for the size of the plant which can be supported has been extended from 1,000 to 2,500 square meter. The exact amount of incentive is depending on plant size and the expected collector yield. And for solar district heating, you should take the yield reported in the solar key mark certificate in the Würzburg site at 50 degrees operating temperature. So it's not, the incentive is not based on the investment cost, even though there is, as reported by some of you, a maximum value. So the total incentive cannot exceed 65% of the investment. It is given in 5 annual installments. And if you do some calculations with good quality collectors, which are typically used in solar district heating plants, the incentive can cover between 40 and 60% of the investment, of course, depending on the investment cost you have. So if you have a large plant on the ground, or if you have to mount it on some roof, and then the cost is higher, and so on. If we consider I would say the best case, more or less, so if you go again to the lower part of the slide, so if we consider this more or less best case of 60% incentive by Conto Termico, then of course you should calculate the savings by solar thermal, and then you should include an expected yield, which could be, let's say, around 500 kilowatt hour per square meter per year, given the typical location and the good operating temperatures of the grid. And then the cost range can be between 30 and 55 euros per megawatt hour. So my conclusion here is that even with a very high, very good incentive, let's say that the heat production costs can be competitive, but it's very, I mean, the competition is very tough. Even when the utilities are using gas for their heat production, in Italy, the legislation is, I would say, the opposite as in Denmark. So basically, we have defiscalization for the gas when you're using the gas in CHP units. So basically, all of these utilities, even if they are not running the CHP all year round, so even if they are running this at partial load, let's say, they can have this tax benefit. And so the the gas production cost can be really low, can be around 30 euros per megawatt hour. Then if you do these calculations also and you calculate the payback time, usually it's again, I would say more than 20 years. So it's quite similar at what was shown also by Per Alex. So for them, it's a bit, really we are at the limit. And so what I see is that the drivers for them are not only economical, but they are, let's say, in perspective to go towards a more efficient network, more based on renewables, maybe to increase also the image and the local acceptance of the district heating. And what I was saying again at the beginning is that usually our experience is that the utilities don't want us to do the full calculation, so they just want some basic parameters about the solar plant, let's say, but they want to calculate the final economics more or less internally. Okay, that was my contribution for Italy. I don't know if you have any questions.
Yes, Ricardo, just shortly about the time for calculation, the 15 years. Do you have any way to take into account that after the 15 years, they still have a running plant that has a high value?
Yes, I mean, in principle, everything is correct. And we always include these remarks in our discussions with the utility. But as you maybe know, the key point is the general attitude from the utilities. I mean, if they are really interested, maybe this is something Jan Olof always says, if they want to do, they do that. So if they want to do, they take these remarks into consideration, I think. If not, they prefer to have a more conservative calculations. So it's like putting all the additional benefits at the side, not including in the calculations. So it's really, so we are aware of these facts, and some of them are also aware, but for some utilities, the attitude is like, we don't know what will happen in 15 years. So I really don't care if I have something valuable on my roof or on my land. But it's true that we always try to underline this. Actually, what we try to do is always to extend this time frame for the calculation. Yes.
Okay. Here's Patrick speak. Oh, sorry.
It's just I think in this norm that we use, there is a way to take this rest value into account in the calculation.
I think the norm was really surprising for me and was very interesting, because if we had such a reference norm, it would be much easier, of course, to convince the utilities. But again, this comes back to the main problem I see. So it's the fact that this is not a standard plant, let's say. So we cannot really refer to norms or even to, how could I say, standardizedly accepted way of doing the calculation. Maybe there was another comment by Patrick, if I heard well.
Here is Patrick speaking. Okay. Yes, I agree with Laura, because utilities most of the time, if they include a gas boiler or anything else, they calculate much longer at a protected lifetime. And we have the problem for solar thermal installations that the calculation period is much below the time the installation really works. So we have to build up some, I don't know, lobbying that this should be seen as well as some kind of an infrastructure project. This is, especially when it's going to really large scale, up to 10,000 or 50,000 square meters.
Okay.
Because the capex are really high compared to fossils, but the opex are pretty low. And since you have you need to buy fuel for gas or anything else, which could not be that forecasted, that precise, let's say it like this, because I don't know for sure what the gas price will be in 20 years. But if in a view of a utility, and if I build a gas boiler, I also take this some kind in my calculations. So I guess it's really important to argue with utilities and to show them the benefit as well in a midterm, long-term perspective.
Yes. Yeah, the point I see is always that there are some utilities which comes with a positive attitude, and so of course they are willing also to include these calculations because they don't trust fossil fuels anymore. Let's put it like that. But there are other utilities which are very conservative. Of course, they are interested somehow in the solar option, but they are still very conservative. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Per Alex was asking if we can know from Germany and France about the loan, the interest rate, the typical interest rate, and the length of loan. I don't know if there was maybe in the presentation, Laura.
Yeah, the interest rate we start for low interest rate at about 4. That's for plans for like Büsingen with a solar complex model, and for private district heating operators, it can go up to 8, or sometimes they want 10 if they want a lot of security.
Wow.
It's really much higher than what Per Alex presented.
And about the loan period, the loan length?
That's a good question. I need to ask. I don't know.
And Mathieu, do you have any values for these two parameters regarding the loan, so period and interest rate?
I am checking the study case of Texon, but I remember, maybe Cedric, if he is here, he can help me. It's my joker. I will say for the 20 years for the loan period, and the rate around 2 or 3%. Long, but sorry, you can hear me?
Yes, better than before, actually.
Yeah, because my micro was not there. Okay, and this is interesting because we have different heat price, and this, for me, this rate is quite important because, for example, Texol takes the LCOA method and put 4% of levelized costs, a rate of 4%. But for example, we have a small a heat supplier, heat solar supplier, and he has a lower heat price because I think he has business model. He has a different business model, and he has the real price of the loan rate, and so I think he's more like 2% of 1.5%.
Okay. Is there any other comments or let's say additions, maybe also from Poland, from Sweden, or from Austria about these economics and financial parameters?
Yeah, from Austria, from my side, Solites, we're mostly using some kind of type for our calculations called weighted average cost of capital, so-called WACC. And the loan interest rates are depending, let's say, I would also say between 2 and 4%. And then depending on the equity rate, we are calculating a WACC which we use to calculate our solar thermal projects.
Okay. Thanks. Any other comments or questions?
Maybe. Hello, from my side. I'm Nicole from Solid. Maybe
Hi, Nicole.
this is
welcome.
Hello. Maybe this is a good time to connect into your discussion with Solid Invest, if you like.
Yes, so we can move to the second part. Per Alex, if you agree with that, I would start with Nicole because she cannot join the whole meeting. So maybe we can start with her presentation. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so Nicole, please.
Perfect,
I
thank
should
you.
give you the floor. Just one moment.
I'm just sorry, I don't have any slides prepared.
Okay, so I don't need to do that. Okay,
No,
so
no,
please.
but I will stick to the questions you
Yes.
sent me up front. And well, if I would say from question to question or from point to point, we can discuss. So I won't. It should be, I think, a discussion, because the questions are quite well. It goes in different directions. So if there are any questions, just jump into.
Okay.
Okay. So your first question was, which share of the total investment cost are you able to collect through this model?
Yeah, could you briefly explain, because I'm not sure all partners know about that. What is the Solid Invest model?
Okay, so very basically, it is a kind of crowd investing model where solar contracting systems are financed partly, and it works out because it's an ESCO system, and you have the monetary backflows yearly, on a yearly basis, so you can calculate and yeah, the whole inflows, outflows better. Like, for example, when you have it on the electricity side with PV systems, you have the yearly, the feed-in rates that you can have as fixed backflows, monetary backflows, to be calculated in your whole overall controlling calculation. Was it clear?
Yes, I think, is this the page of the model?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's,
so maybe we can show
the website, but we just have it in German.
Okay.
Well, it's mainly an instrument that should help to build new solar thermal systems on an ESCO basis. And the money for that is collected via, as said, crowd financing, and this is on an not on an equity-based crowdfunding, but on an we collect. So it's based on a loan that we get from the investor, and we pay back a yearly sum of the investment back to the investor.
Okay, thanks. Yes, I think it's clear. So let's go back to the questions. Sorry, you were starting to answer.
Okay, so the question was again, which share of the total investment cost are you able to collect through this model? And this is quite a tricky question, because it's not a question of how much we are able to collect, but it's more about the question how much Solid Invest share do we need for financing the system, the new system, and how much do we want, how high should the share be we want to of the whole investment we want to integrate. And in general, it can be said that it's a share between 10 and 12% of the total investment sum.
Okay.
That comes from out of Solid Invest, of the Solid Invest pot.
So it's not really the typical equity share you usually collect.
No,
which
it's
is
lower.
30%.
It's lower.
Okay.
It's lower. And it also depends, of course, where the solar system will be erected, realized. Because, for example, in Austria right now we have very low interest rates on bank loans, but in the US or in Singapore, where we also have systems on an ESCO basis, there the interest rates are much higher, and there it's a very good instrument for with a cheaper investment.
Okay.
So it's always a mixture when we finance systems. It's always a mixture of loans, classical bank loans. When available, there are fundings, and then there is solid invest plus some equity. Are there any questions on that?
No, I think you can also, let's say, report about the whole model, and then maybe we can have a final session with questions.
Sorry, I didn't get.
I was saying you can also go on with your answers, and then at the end maybe we can have a final session.
Okay. So I just answered already the second question, which was how is this complemented with other equity sources and debt financing? So it's, as said, the share is loans, equity financing, and if available, funding.
Okay.
Then is there a key? Is this a key element to convince the bank to emit a loan for a plant? Yes, definitely, but also it's always depending on the project itself and if there is a funding rate. For example, if we have a high funding share available, then bank loans are easier to get because the total share for the loan is lower, and there is not so much need for solid investment.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
funding is a great driver for bank loans. Then have you ever thought of combining this model with pure crowdfunding with an internet platform? No. Crowdfunding via an internet platform mainly is based on equity crowdfunding. As said before, we do lending-based crowdfunding, which is a completely different approach. And for us, it's a very big marketing instrument as well that we use, and on the platform you get easily lost, I would say, and yeah, and we don't need it because normally internet platforms it's mostly for new companies, so that are not well known, and it helps them to promote the company itself, their services and products. And our advantage was that Solid is already existing since 1992. People know, or a lot of people know the company, and there was a basis of trust already existing. So that's a big advantage. Okay, so next question. Do you know which kind of investors are joining the model, and what is the average investment size for them? There are typically two kinds of investors. One type is that it's more conscious people who have chosen socially and environmentally aware lifestyle, and that includes green investment forms. And I would say people, the age of the people is between 30 and 50 years. So not very young people and not very old ones. But on the other hand, there are retirees who are looking for alternative and more lucrative forms for savings, for for savings to bank deposits. So yes, for them we have a lot of older people who want to have more interest rate, I would say, than in banks. And the average investment size is approximately 7,000 euros per person. But there is a new law since 2015, and with this law, the investment size was limited to 5,000 euros per person and year, with some exceptions existing, and that law lowers the average investment. But before 2015, and Solid Invest is existing, it has been existing since 2013, that limit wasn't existing, so we have a much higher average investment.
Sorry, Nicole, just to understand, because I remember something with this limit connected to the fact that it's possible then to detract the investment from the taxes, or is it a general limit so that you cannot invest more than 5,000 anyway?
It's not. It doesn't have to do anything with the taxes. It's tax.
Okay.
It's tax free. It's the limit before was. So in Austria, you can have additional income of 730 euros per year that you don't have to pay taxes on. Okay. And with our interest rate of 4% per year, you can invest in 80,000 euros, and you are below that limit.
Yes.
And so a lot of people invested 18,000 euros.
Exactly.
Exactly. But this still happens. But you need to. There is an exception on that law that the investor has to confirm that its total income doesn't exceed a certain amount of blah blah blah, and there it's a little bit complicated, but Austria is there are no laws without exceptions, I would say, and right now this law is not executed from any body, any governmental body, so it's mainly on the paper, which doesn't help us in that way, because we still have to stick to the law, but with the exceptions are not executed very strictly.
Yeah, that's a very Italian situation. I'm happy to hear.
Yes, but actually that law, I'm not very satisfied with that law, because it limits the investment size for the persons, and the average investment size is getting lower and lower with that law, and it's not. That law was made for startup companies, and which is okay, but I would say it's a little bit that people are supervised by the government, and that they can't decide, or that it has the impression that they can't decide what they do with their own money.
Okay.
So, for example, when you play lotto or go to the casino, nobody will ask what to do with. Yeah. But well, anyway, that goes in another direction. Then I jump to the next question, which is how much money did you collect so far? Right now, we almost have collected 2.5 million euros. So that's quite a lot. We collected the first million within the first 6 months when the model or when Solid Invest started, and then we stopped doing offensive marketing, and I would say the the rest of the 1.5 million euros came with just by talking about it. And we send out a newsletter to the investors if they like, or to any interested people, and it's a self-runner, and that's very successful. And so what are the main conditions for the investors? So as said, it's a 5%. You get 5% per annum as tax, not as tax, as interest rate. Then there is 5 years of binding, and the minimum investment is 1,000 euros. And but we also set a maximum. There's a maximum size, which is 25 euros, because we don't want to have very big investors. And yes, so that's more or less the frame on this model.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot. Is there any question to Nicole about the model?
Okay.
Actually, I had one. I was just waiting, but I was wondering about the importance, the relevance of the local dimension. So you were talking about the investors, which, by the way, between 30 and 50 years old, I think they are very young people. Just because I am in this range. But I was just wondering, you also talk about plans realized, of course, in the US and in Singapore. So I was wondering, is there any, so what do you show to investors? So just plans which are built locally, or also that their money goes to, okay. And is there, isn't there a problem? Let's put it like that. Don't they want to see then the output in, or they just care about the 4% interest rate?
That depends on the people. There are a few that are very interested in details, which is good when you invest somewhere, I think, to get a lot of information. And what the investors get is on a 6-month basis is a diagram which shows how much it shows the shares, how much money lies in which project. So there are a few in Austria, there is USA, there is Singapore, but they are all operated within the Solid group. So we are the operator, and so the risk, I would say, the risk is shared because it's a pool of projects, and it's all operated by Solid, which I think lowers the risk too.
Okay, yes. So it's like when you buy a basket of different companies.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, just maybe one last question, Nicole. Do you know if there are other companies, competitors, which are trying to follow this experience?
On solar thermal basis?
That's good questions. I don't know exactly. Maybe on solar thermal, but also on the field of, I would say, energy provider, energy plant provider, more in general, maybe.
Yes, there are a lot, I think. I know that there are a lot, and it's getting more and more. Also, the utilities are using that way for binding their clients. So it's I would say it's a very, very strong instrument for different reasons and different motivations. And depending if you're just a startup company, or if you're a well-known, large company, everything is possible. And so far, in Austria, there is no real bad experiences with crowdfunding in the energy renewable energy sector happening. So that strengthens the trust into it, I would say. But of course, it's getting more and more, and it's like with every product and service, you have to try to get the attention of the investors.
Stand out of the crowd, let's say, of course.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks a lot again. So, of course, feel free to stay online, but if you have to leave, no problem. Thanks again for the presentation.
You're welcome, and I'm sorry that I have to leave, but
no
I was enjoying to tell you a little bit about the model, and yes, I wish you a very fruitful web meeting.
Thanks again. Thanks, Nicole.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. So maybe if then someone else is interested, of course, I can give you Nicole's email address, and you can ask her directly some questions. So maybe Per Alex, would you like to talk a bit about some other financing possibilities from funds? Sorry.
Yes. Actually, I thought that the main problem here was interest rates and length of loans and that kind of things. And that's, of course, a discussion point. But I think in another web meeting, we have to look at the costs. But let's look at some other possibilities, because there might be national differences in interest rates. So I have three I will present short. The first one is from Denmark. It's Export Credit Fund. So if you take the first slide. Yeah. If a Danish company wants to export, they can get credit assurance from this fund. And it has been working for many years, and its loans are guaranteed by the Danish state. So let's take the next one. The procedure is that if there's a contract between a Danish supplier and a utility, for instance, or a company in a foreign country, this company can go to the local bank, and then the fund from Denmark can give a guarantee for the credit in the bank, but only for 85%. The last 15% must be financed locally. And that means, of course, that the interest rate will go down, because you have this guarantee from the Danish state. And but the length of the loans is, they say maximum 8.5 years, but actually it's they can go up to 15 years. So if somebody in a European country wants to buy solar thermal parts of a solar thermal plant, this part can be financed in this way. So that was the first example. The next one is Elena. I guess you know it, maybe all of you, but I've just mentioned it, that this is a European Investment Bank that's giving the loans, and there's a procedure where you can define a project, and they give loans for energy projects, for instance. And we have two examples in Denmark. One is approved, another one will be approved this summer, I guess, where a region has made, they are asked the utilities in the region what they want to do in the next 3 years. And then they have made a program for this Elena project, and it has to have a certain amount of maybe 50 million euros. And then it will be discussed and reviewed, and if it's approved, the region can get the loan. But the most interesting thing here is, if we take the next one, is that for technical assistance, that means in design phase, there's actually a grant of up to 90% of the costs. So you can start projects with a grant, but the problem is that if you are not realizing the projects, then you might have to pay back this grant. But it's not only for district heating. You can combine for street lighting or other projects in the region, and then make this application. And again, if there are problems getting loans, then this is the European Investment Bank, and they can finance. The last one is a smaller one. It's European Energy Efficiency Fund, and it's for smaller projects. And as far as I can see, no grants in this program. But you can get, again, if it's a region, you can get a sum of money for projects, and this is more than there's very different things you can do here. There's you can also, for instance, if you look at the corner right in the bottom, Romania has got 25 million euro to a bank, and it means that this bank can then give loans for projects. So there's direct loans, and there's also you give money to a bank or guarantees to a bank in a country, and then this bank can administrate loans. There's one example I took at if you take the next slide, because if you go to their homepage, they have some examples, and one is case study region Rhône-Alpes. They have got they have invested 20 billion euro in schools for energy efficiency, and they have used this energy efficient fund. So I don't know, Mathieu, if you know about this, that your region is active.
I know about it. I know well the SDHp2m, but it's more my other colleague who work on energy efficiency, who know more the SDHp2m. I know well it's the same name, but it's different. It's the fund OSE. SPL is for energy efficiency, and the fund, there's an investment fund of investment which is named OSE to invest in renewable energies. And this fund is interested in investing in SDH projects. He is involved in one project in the region, but yeah, I know well the SPL.
Okay, but that was the 3 examples, and then I was thinking there's a network of banks where they have they want to invest in society. There's, for instance, in Denmark, where we have Merkur Bank.
You sent an address, right? Just let me open the example you sent.
Okay, yeah, that's a video.
No, I mean the bank.
Oh, Merkur Bank, yes, yes, and if we they have a Dutch bank also in the network, Triodos Bank. And I was wondering, why don't we ask some of those banks or this network to invest in solar district heating? If we have problems getting financing. But that was just my start of the discussion of the second part.
Yes, maybe I can give just a feedback on that, because in the framework of the Smart Reflex project, we had one of our, let's say, coaching workshop, capacity building workshop with the municipalities and the utilities, and it was about financing, and we invited also one of these bank, which is called, it's Banca Etica, which means ethical bank in Italy, and they are, of course, they are investing in this kind of project. But I mean, from their point of view, it was, of course, there was no problem. I mean, they were interested in that, but they saw the problem from the other side. So as long as we don't have enough, let's say, demand from the market, of course, we cannot develop specific products. So we are always ready and willing to evaluate single specific projects, but we cannot, of course, develop a special package unless we have enough market for that. So even though they are ethical, let's say, they are somehow special, but they anyway should look at the at what is the total amount of the investments they are moving. That's my small experience when I interacted with these people from the ethical bank, and it was actually about small district heating networks with renewables, of course. Is there any other comment or suggestion or integration to what Per Alex said with financing possibility apart from the grants we have at national and regional level? Do you have any other experience or suggestions? No? Okay. Maybe, Per Alex, I have a question, but actually it's not about the second part, it's about the first one, because when I was looking at your presentations, you show this difference between quite a high payback time, around 20 years for the calculation, which is anyway, let's say, in the range of the lifetime of the solar plant, maybe even lower. But on the other hand, you show that the heat cost was competitive. I mean, it was even lower, and that was a precondition for the utility to go on with the project. What is the general attitude of the utility between these two parameters? I mean, very high payback time, not very high, but high payback time and low heat cost. What is the main importance?
Well, I think this calculation was not made in the presentation. The calculation was with a lower price of wood chips. But we have a discussion every time with utilities, and it's different from utility to utility. If they are very positive to solar, like Dronninglund, for instance, they say we will go for 25 years because that will give the cheapest heat price. And if they are more skeptic, they might go for 20 years, or they might make a mixed loan. For instance, Brastrup made 10 years loan with variable interest, and then that was for the 50%, and then they made another loan with fixed interest. Mm. So it differs, but normally it's not less than 20 years.
Okay, but once again, apart from the quantitative results you have from the calculation, the interpretation, let's say, of these results depends really on the attitude of the utilities. They really want to go for efficiency and renewables and solar or not.
Yes, and also, of course, we have a huge dominating supplier, Arcon, and they visit the utilities and tell them that this will last at least 25 years, maybe 30 years. And we have so many plants already, and some of those are 30 years. So people trust in that, and then they dare to take the long time loans.
Okay. Any other question, comments?
Evert is speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Some additional information about subsidies. At the conference in April in Graz, we will have participants from different people and partners from the West Balkan countries, and they are invited by the World Bank Group. And this is the International Finance Corporation. They work out projects up to now in, I think, 6 countries, especially for cities as Sarajevo, Belgrade, Beograd, and they have worked out projects, and I think there will be also a possibility to have subsidies from the World Bank, and will be possible to have also contact and speak with the people how it runs. Possibly, perhaps for the countries in the west, in the eastern part of Europe. So, thanks.
Thanks, Harold. Yeah, that's very interesting point to have. I mean, to explore the possibility of this additional support. Thanks. More comments? Okay, I think I mean, the situation we collected in this web meetings are very interesting. I think the general picture is that we have some kind of subsidy, more or less in all countries. In some of them are quite high. I would say in Italy we have a very high subsidy, maybe also in France. So Mathieu said that it was between maybe 40 and 60, so it was quite high. We also have quite reliable values for costs, at least for OPEX and CAPEX. What maybe we can discuss further during the project is these different ways of measuring the OPEX, and this fact that the Danish values seems to be much lower than the other ones when they are expressed in euros per megawatt hour produced, rather than in percentage of the investment cost of the capex. But I think the conditions are quite good, let's say, for regarding the economics. Of course, there is a tough competition with fossil fuels, but also with biofuels, because in many countries wood chips, for instance, are quite cheap, and so it's a tough competition. What we can maybe as a follow-up of this web meeting, what we can maybe think about, and Laura, we should think if this is within the scope of the project, but we can try to prepare a very short summary. Let's say it's even less than a fact sheet. I would say 1 page, maybe summarizing which are the parameters we should be taken into account in a calculation, both for costs but also for savings, of course. And so, for instance, the increase in fossil fuel costs and so on, and maybe also together with some suggestions for values, with standard values that can be taken into consideration. Because I mean, if we don't have an history of these plants in Italy, of course we should refer to the cost values that have been recorded for the plants in Denmark, in Germany, and so on. So maybe that such a page, such a short fact sheet could be a valuable tool also for all the partners in their project development when they go and talk to municipalities or utilities. Okay, I don't know if there are any other comments or questions. Okay, if not, I think we can close the web meeting. We always close with 10 minutes in advance, which is a nice thing. I just want to remind you to please disseminate the fact that we have this video of the first coaching webinar on solar biomass. And once again, it's on our website under the services and tools sub web page. You find it in the menu. Thanks again for all the presentation and for all the questions and your contribution. And I wish you all a nice day. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.